Imagine a world where the most influential texts in human history were not written by a single, unified voice, but by individuals with distinct personalities, interests, and communities. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are not just historical documents. They are living testimonies of the early Christian communities, each with its own unique perspective on the life and teachings of Jesus Christ. This video delves into the fascinating world of the Gospels, exploring how each writer's personal interests and the dynamics of their local communities shaped these sacred texts. It challenges the traditional view that the Gospels were written solely for their originating communities and argues that they were, in fact, intended to be universal in appeal. The Gospels are often treated as a monolithic collection of texts, but a closer look reveals the distinct personalities and interests of the writers. Mark, the earliest Gospel, is concise and fast-paced, focusing on the actions of Jesus rather than his teachings. This might reflect Mark's own preference for a practical, action-oriented approach to faith. Matthew, on the other hand, is more structured and detailed, with a strong emphasis on the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. This suggests that Matthew was deeply interested in the continuity between the Jewish and Christian traditions. Luke, a Gentile, writes with a broader, more inclusive perspective, highlighting Jesus' concern for the marginalized and the universal message of salvation. Finally, John, the most mystical and theological of the Gospels, presents Jesus as the divine Logos, the Word made flesh, reflecting a community that was deeply engaged in philosophical and theological discussions. Recent scholarship has emphasized the role of local communities in shaping the Gospels. Mark's Gospel, for instance, is often associated with the community in Antioch or Rome. This community faced persecution and needed a gospel that emphasized the suffering and triumph of Jesus. Similarly, Matthew's Gospel is believed to have been written for a Jewish Christian community that valued the connection between Jesus and the Old Testament. Luke's Gospel, with its focus on social justice and the inclusion of Gentiles, likely reflects the concerns of a diverse community in Greece or Turkey. John's Gospel, with its deep theological reflections and mystical language, is thought to have been written for a community in Ephesus that was grappling with the nature of Jesus' divinity. However, the idea that each gospel was written exclusively for a local community has been challenged. Richard Bauckham, a prominent New Testament scholar, argues that the Gospels were intended for a broader audience. The fact that Matthew and Luke used Mark as a source indicates that Mark had already circulated beyond its original community. Similarly, the extensive use of sources in Luke's prologue suggests that the evangelists had access to a variety of traditions and intended their Gospels to be widely read. Bauckham points out that the Gospels, unlike Paul's letters, were not written to address specific issues within a particular community, but were meant to be universally appealing. If the Gospels were indeed intended for a broader audience, the early Christian communities faced a significant challenge: how to reconcile the different accounts of Jesus' life and teachings. This problem became acute in the early 2nd century, when all 4 Gospels were in circulation. The Diatessaron, a harmonized version of the Gospels created by Tatian, was one attempt to address this issue. However, the fact that the Gospels were widely known and used suggests that they were not seen as mutually exclusive, but as complementary accounts of the same truth. The Gospels are not just historical records, but living traditions that evolved over time. The Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, share a common source known as Q, which suggests a process of oral and written transmission. John, the most distinctive of the Gospels, reflects a later stage in this process, where the focus had shifted from Jesus' teachings to his divine nature. The differences between the Gospels are not contradictions, but different perspectives on the same events, each shaped by the interests and concerns of the evangelists and their communities. John's Gospel stands apart from the Synoptics in its theological depth and mystical language. Unlike the Synoptics, which focus on Jesus' teachings and actions, John presents Jesus as the divine Logos, the embodiment of God's presence on earth. The I am sayings in John, such as, "I am the bread of life," and "I am the light of the world," reflect a deep theological reflection on Jesus' identity. John's unique approach to the life of Jesus, including the signs and the extended dialogues, suggests a community that was deeply engaged in theological and philosophical discussions. The Gospels are not just historical documents, but living testimonies of the early Christian communities. Each evangelist brought their own unique perspective and interests to the task of writing, and their works reflect the dynamics of their local communities. However, the Gospels were not written solely for these communities, but were intended to be universal in appeal. The challenges of reconciling diverse accounts and the evolution of gospel traditions highlight the dynamic and living nature of these sacred texts. In the end, the Gospels remain a testament to the enduring power of faith and the human quest for meaning.